This video is based exclusively on official law enforcement statements, court documents, and verified reporting from major news outlets.
28 days. No arrest. No suspect named. No confirmed motive. And tonight, the number just jumped to $1 million. Savannah Guthrie has put $1,000 on the table for information about her mother, Nancy. That is not just a reward. That is pressure. Because when money reaches 7 figures, silence starts to crack. If this crime involved 2 people, one of them is now doing the math. And math does not care about loyalty. Tonight, we're breaking down what this $1 million escalation really means. What the new DNA development actually tells us. And why day 28 may be the moment someone decides to talk. If you want real analysis, not recycled headlines, subscribe right now. Like this video to push this case further into the algorithm. Because the more eyes on this, the harder it becomes for anyone to stay silent. This case just entered a new phase, and pressure changes everything.
A reward is not just a headline. It is a psychological event. Before today, the reward in Nancy Guthrie's case stood at $200,000, $100,000 from the FBI, and $100,000 from an anonymous donor. Significant, yes, but survivable. $200,000 is tempting. $1 million is destabilizing. That number does not simply attract attention. It alters behavior. Because investigations do not operate on evidence alone. They operate on human weakness. And human weakness has a price. Now that price has reached 7 figures. $1 million is life-altering money. It is debt-erasing money. It is mortgage-free money. It is relocation money. It is the kind of money that forces someone to sit alone in a room and ask, is loyalty worth this? Is silence worth this? Is prison worth this? And if there were 2 people involved in Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, that question just became unavoidable. Let's pause and examine what this really means. In coordinated crimes, shared secrecy is the foundation. 2 individuals who plan something together bind themselves through mutual risk. Each person holds leverage over the other. If one speaks, both fall. That mutual vulnerability creates temporary loyalty. But loyalty under fear is fragile. And loyalty under financial pressure is even more fragile. When media attention intensifies, and in this case it has, psychological strain increases daily. Nancy Guthrie is not an anonymous victim. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie. That visibility amplifies everything. Every news cycle, every update, every mention, and now a $1 million reward. If this crime involved a planner and an executor, the psychological profiles of those 2 individuals may already be diverging. The planner, often more calculated, may believe they are insulated. They may feel intellectually superior. They may believe their operational discipline will protect them. But the executor, the one who physically approached the house, who risked exposure on camera, carries a different burden. They were seen. They were recorded. Their image has circulated nationally. They feel visible. And visibility breeds fear. Now imagine that executor watching the news, hearing the number $1 million, knowing that anyone with knowledge, a friend, a partner, even the other suspect, could choose self-preservation. Because here is the uncomfortable truth about multi-person crimes. Trust erodes under pressure. Time amplifies doubt. And money accelerates betrayal. There is a reason law enforcement increases reward strategically. It is not only to attract outside tips. It is to destabilize inside silence. Someone who helped, even indirectly, now understands that remaining quiet is no longer just morally difficult. It is financially irrational. If you were loosely connected, if you drove someone somewhere that night, if you lent a vehicle, if you noticed unusual behavior in January, if you saw someone obsessively researching Savannah Guthrie's salary, you are now facing a new calculation. Because the reward is not paid for certainty. It is paid for information leading to recovery. And information can be incremental. One detail. One memory. One location. One vehicle sighting. Now overlay this with day 28. Investigations often enter a psychological pivot around the 3-week mark. The first week is chaos. The second week is intensity. By the third week, suspects begin testing emotional distance. They start convincing themselves that investigators lack direction. That no arrest means no trail. That silence equals safety. That is the moment complacency sets in. And complacency is where cracks begin. Savannah Guthrie's public acknowledgement that her mother may not be found alive introduces something else into this equation. Finality. It signals that the family is confronting worst-case scenarios. That they are prepared for truth, however painful. That they are not negotiating hope at any cost. That seriousness shifts the emotional gravity of the case. And when a family publicly escalates a reward to $1 million, they are not simply pleading for help. They are escalating pressure. Strategically. Because someone knows something. Maybe they were involved. Maybe they were adjacent. Maybe they were confided in. Maybe they were asked for help after the fact. Multi-person crimes create aftershocks. There are conversations. There are behavioral shifts. There are unexplained absences. There are sudden changes in routine. And someone in someone's orbit notices. Money forces those observers to reconsider silence. Now return to the central question of this series. 2 nights. 1 suspect or 2? If there were 2, the reward is not just an offer. It is a wedge. Because in dual offender dynamics, the weaker personality often experiences anxiety first. The more impulsive participant feels exposure more. When the DNA update was released, many people interpreted it too quickly. The headline sounded almost reassuring. DNA samples came back from people who had reason to be there. To the casual observer, that sounds like closure. Like the evidence led nowhere. Like investigators came up empty. But in complex investigations, that kind of statement is rarely the full story. Because what it really means is this. The obvious profiles were identified. The expected DNA was accounted for. But that does not mean the scene was clean. It means the known contributors were eliminated. And elimination is progress. Investigators collected biological material from inside Nancy Guthrie's home. That material was tested against known individuals who legitimately had access, family members, regular visitors, expected presence. Those matches make sense. But the crucial detail is what followed. There is a partial sample still being processed. And partial DNA profiles are where cases either stall or break open. A partial profile can result from many factors. Degraded biological material exposed to time or environment. Extremely small quantities of DNA. Mixed samples involving multiple contributors. Transfer through secondary contact. Interference from overlapping genetic markers. In controlled lab conditions, clean single-source DNA is straightforward. But real-world crime scenes are rarely clean, especially when multiple people have lived in, visited, or accessed the same environment. Now here is where the possibility of two suspects becomes scientifically significant. If one offender entered the home, biological interpretation is challenging but manageable. If two offenders entered the home, mixture complexity increases dramatically. Imagine a scenario where the victim's DNA is present. Family DNA is present. One unknown contributor is present in low quantity. A second unknown contributor is present in even lower quantity. Separating those contributors requires advanced probabilistic genotyping software. Even then, analysts must determine, are we looking at one unknown individual? Or are we looking at overlapping genetic signatures from two? This is not guesswork. This is statistical modeling. Every allele detected must be evaluated for probability. And every probability must withstand courtroom scrutiny. In high-profile cases, forensic interpretation is attacked aggressively. Defense attorneys will question contamination. They will question laboratory handling. They will question mixture interpretation thresholds. So investigators cannot rush this process. Now consider another important factor. There was no immediate CODIS hit. CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, contains profiles from individuals previously arrested or convicted of qualifying offenses. No hit does not mean no suspect. It means no prior criminal DNA record in the federal system. That detail is psychologically significant. Because a targeted, premeditated crime conducted over months of research does not align with impulsive repeat offenders. It aligns with someone who blends into normal life. Someone without a criminal record. Someone who may have never been in the system before. Now introduce investigative genetic genealogy. If that partial sample is viable, investigators can upload the profile into public genealogy databases, platforms where individuals voluntarily submit DNA for ancestry research. This is the method that identified the Golden State Killer. It is the method that identified suspects in other high-profile cases. But genetic genealogy does not produce instant results. It produces family trees. It identifies distant relatives. It requires mapping. If two suspects were involved, and only one left biological material inside the home, genetic genealogy may identify one branch of a family tree, while the other suspect remains invisible biologically. That creates investigative imbalance. One suspect becomes vulnerable through science. The other remains protected by absence. Unless there was secondary transfer. Modern forensic science recognizes something called transfer DNA. If two individuals shared equipment, gloves, backpack, holster, vehicle, DNA can transfer indirectly. One person handles an object. The other later touches it. Trace material moves between surfaces. In mixed environments, transfer complicates interpretation. And if both suspects handled shared tools before the February entry, mixture patterns could reflect that interaction. Which may explain why analysts are proceeding cautiously. Now think about the psychological impact of a partial sample. The public hears partial and thinks weak. A suspect hears partial and thinks unknown. They do not know how strong it is. They do not know if genetic genealogy is already underway. They do not know if a distant cousin uploaded DNA last week. They do not know whether probabilistic modeling is narrowing toward them quietly. Uncertainty is destabilizing. If there are two suspects, both are now waiting on the lab. Waiting for news. Waiting for silence. Waiting for clarity. And laboratories do not operate emotionally. They operate methodically. But methodical progress can be more dangerous than visible action. Because visible action creates reaction. Silent forensic work creates surprise. Now let's connect this to the two-night theory. If the January surveillance visit involved one individual and the February entry involved another, only the February entrant may have left biological material inside the home. That means DNA may identify the executor, not the planner. And if the executor is identified first, pressure shifts dramatically. Because once one name is known, investigators trace communication networks, phone records, location data, financial links, social proximity. Two-person crimes rarely survive independent interrogation. Someone contradicts. Someone hesitates. Someone slips. Now combine this scientific pressure with the $1 million reward. Money destabilizes silence. DNA destabilizes certainty. And both are now operating simultaneously. The reward pressures relationships. The lab pressures biology. If there were two suspects, the convergence of those pressures creates fracture points. And fractures are where investigations advance. Because DNA does not negotiate. It waits. And once interpreted, it narrows. And once it narrows, it names. The question is not whether science works. The question is whether there are one or two individuals waiting for that science to finish. And if there are two, which one begins to worry first? If there were two people involved in Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, then this investigation is no longer just about evidence. It is about pressure. And pressure does not affect everyone equally. In dual offender dynamics, there is almost always imbalance. One personality dominates. One personality follows. One plans. One executes. One believes they are smarter. The other carries more visible risk. And over time, imbalance creates fracture. Let's imagine the structure. If this crime was engineered, not impulsive, then someone researched for months. Someone searched the address. Someone looked up property images. Someone searched Savannah Guthrie's salary. That kind of behavior suggests fixation, calculation, target selection. That is planner behavior. Now contrast that with the image captured on February 1st. The backpack, the holster, the physical approach. That is execution behavior. The executor assumes physical exposure, camera risk, proximity to the victim, direct involvement. In coordinated crimes, the planner often feels safer. They believe they left fewer fingerprints, less DNA, less exposure. But the executor carries sensory memory. They remember the inside of the house. They remember the silence. They remember the timeline. And memory creates anxiety. Now it is day 28. No arrest. But no clearance either. And the longer time passes without resolution, the more two suspects may begin to question each other. Did you say anything? Did you slip? Did someone see you? Did someone recognize the jacket? Did someone notice your behavior changed? Silence between two conspirators is not peaceful. It is tense. Every news update becomes a trigger. Every reward escalation becomes a threat. And $1 million is not abstract. It is personal. Because in coordinated crimes, betrayal rarely begins with morality. It begins with fear. And fear intensifies when outcomes become unpredictable. Let's talk about unpredictability. If genetic genealogy is underway, neither suspect knows. If digital subpoenas are active, neither suspect knows. If cell tower analysis is being refined, neither suspect knows. If vehicle forensics return something unexpected, neither suspect knows. Uncertainty erodes confidence. And confidence is the glue that keeps co-conspirators aligned. Now imagine two suspects reacting differently to that uncertainty. The dominant personality may project calm. Nothing will happen. They have nothing. It's been weeks. But the secondary personality may internalize doubt. What if the partial DNA is enough? What if they're closer than we think? What if you turn on me first? And that final question is the most dangerous one. Because in two-person crimes, whoever speaks first often shapes the narrative. And narrative control can reduce exposure. If one suspect fears the other might cooperate first, preemptive cooperation becomes strategy. And strategy beats loyalty. Now let's examine behavioral changes. Investigators often look for sudden financial movement, relocation planning, withdrawal from social circles, increased agitation, paranoia-driven behavior, online searches about DNA or rewards, unusual deletion of digital history. In single offender cases, those changes are isolated. In dual offender cases, they ripple. One person's anxiety affects the other. One person's instability pressures the partnership. And partnerships under stress fracture faster than individuals. Now consider the $1 million reward again. It is not only directed at the suspects. It is directed at their orbit. Friends, family, acquaintances, co-workers, anyone who sensed something unusual. And in two-person crimes, someone always senses something. Someone notices tension. Someone notices distance. Someone notices sudden fear when the case appears on television. Money amplifies those observations. It turns suspicion into incentive. And incentives reshape silence. Now combine the scientific pressure of DNA with the financial pressure of the reward. If one suspect begins to believe the lab may identify them, and the other believes the reward may tempt betrayal, the alliance weakens from both sides. Science narrows options. Money narrows trust. And narrowed trust creates confession opportunities. If there are two suspects, the break will not necessarily come from forensic discovery alone. It may come from interpersonal collapse, a disagreement, a panic, a conversation overheard, a digital trace that leads investigators from one to the other. Because dual offender crimes are rarely perfectly synchronized over time. They decay. And when they decay, someone talks. Not because they want to, but because pressure reshapes their priorities. Now let's return to the central question. 2 nights. One suspect or two? If it was one person, then the psychological battle is internal. But if it was two, the psychological.
28 days. No arrest. No suspect named. A partial DNA profile still under analysis. 2 separate surveillance nights. And now $1 million. If this was one person, they are living under increasing scientific pressure. If this was 2, they are living under psychological pressure. And pressure does not remain stable forever. It builds. It narrows options. It forces decisions. Some cases break because of evidence. Some break because of ego. Some break because someone decides that silence is no longer worth the cost. Tonight, the cost of silence is $1 million. And in coordinated crimes, loyalty has an expiration date. The question is not just who did this. The question is whether someone involved is about to talk. Because when science and money move at the same time, something usually gives. Nancy Guthrie deserves answers. Her family deserves truth. And somewhere the clock is ticking. If you've watched this far, you understand this case isn't static. It's tightening. Subscribe for continued analysis. Because when this breaks, and cases under this much pressure eventually do, you'll want to understand how it happened.